Please be seated. In June last year, Jamie and I had the wonderful opportunity to travel to Windsor Castle at the invitation of our friend Canon James Woodward, whom some of you may have met a couple of years ago when he came to Ottawa. On the day of our departure, I remember all the last-minute organizing of our luggage. I had to take a hat, of course, and all of that. The dog had to get to her home, away from home, the kennel, that is. She's a bit wild for anyone else to keep in their home. Then to the airport, wait in this line, wait in that one, get a cup of coffee. It's going to be a long night. When we got to Gatwick, we waited for our transportation to our hotel, and then a long and rather wild journey to it. There was a taxi protest over the rival Uber service that day in London, and our driver dodged all kinds of parked traffic and tricky intersections. At one point, perhaps an hour and a half or so into this trek, we stopped to let one of the passengers off, or a couple, I guess it was a husband and wife, off at their hotel. And the man who was getting off looked really, really white. I remember Jamie saying, "Wow, I can't believe we're here already." And everybody, except that man who looked like he was going to faint at any moment, laughed. Another half hour or so, and we were left on a street corner with a general, "Your hotel is over there," in that direction. So we found the lobby, and I remember sitting there exhausted and not really caring even about my hat at that point, or how I looked, or whether we had all our bags, or what our room was going to look like. I just wanted to rest. That's modern, full convenience travel for you. Now I want you to look at your bulletin, your cover. And there's something wrong with this picture. The three folks on the left have just completed an international journey without Google Maps, without airplanes, and they were lost at least some of the time. They didn't know where they were going. So even if they had caravans of camels like the ones you see out in front of you here this morning, do you really think they would get to this place and look so composed, so regal, their robes looking like they've just come from the cleaners? I don't think so. That's a beautiful rendition, by the way, that banner over there. And so is the cover of this bulletin. It is beautiful, moving, gorgeous art. A beautiful way of presenting the text of the gospel. But don't be fooled. I don't think it really looked like that. And furthermore, whatever it looked like, it didn't last like that. I'll say a word about that in a minute. I remember when Bishop Baycroft called me one afternoon to announce that he had decided on the new name for our newly amalgamated parish. We were, of course, in the midst of bringing together St. Paul's in Overbrook and St. Christopher's, Gloucester. Looking back at this distance, it all looks like it went rather smoothly. There were a few bumps. Even this property, Jamie, you remember some. You had a hand in this, along with a good number of you who are here this morning. It's good, I think, how time makes everything look like it was all a little bit more smooth. So, with rather great delight, after all, bishops don't have the opportunity to name new parishes, at least not these days, very often. With great delight, Bishop Baycroft told me that the parish would be called the parish of the Epiphany. I'm sure that I thanked him. I'm that kind of person. I'm sure that I thanked him, and then immediately began to wonder, what would people think? And how would this new name work? I think we probably had some ideas of our own. As I recall, we weren't consulted, actually, in the decision. Well, some 17 years later, I think that the name Epiphany has worked marvelously well for this community and this parish. What has Epiphany become? In short, truly a place and a community to seek Christ. This little shelter on this beautiful corner and this beautiful day, it's hard not to look out the windows this morning, isn't it? Becomes a bit like the house on the cover of the bulletin, the place where the Holy One is sought, adored, encountered. Well, you know better than I what Epiphany looks like today. I read with great interest in your recent church hack morning, and I began to wonder, how could I make that work at St. Matthew's? I'll let you know, Jeff. What great fun it must have been. Your education courses that are really helping people to think about our faith and history and our roots and what it means to be a practicing Christian today in this world. I know a bit about your good food work and the importance of helping this neighborhood to share good food at good prices, your help at Cornerstone and Center 454 and so on. Don't you love the line in that gospel that I read to you, that when they saw that the star had stopped, so they were getting close to their destination, they were, and the quote is, overwhelmed with joy. And I saw just out in the vestibule here, that little wooden carving is still on the wall depicting the Epiphany. If you haven't looked at it for a while, look at it this morning, because you will see that the wise men in that carving are filled with delight. I think they're dancing, one at least, he's dancing as he got off his camel. They are overwhelmed with joy. And they gave their gifts. That's another sermon, I think, so I'll have to come again. Just remember, if I were a wise man, I would do my part. Yet what can I give him? Give him my heart. Well, the lovely scene, it didn't last. It was but a fleeting glimpse of the Christ. That's all those ancient travelers got. They had been journeying for weeks or months or more, and that's all they got, a little glimpse of the Christ child. And then they had to turn on their heels and leave. Why? Because the life that they had encountered there was a dangerous life. A life that would challenge all the powers of this world, even to death on a cross. Just after this story, we read of one of the powers of the world in Jesus' day, Herod's power, and how he ordered the slaughter of all male children under 2 years of age because he could not bear the threat from this rival king. From the very beginning, though, Jesus' way is ever so different from the powers and authorities of this world. His way of peace, of nonviolence, of love. I wonder sometimes what it was like for those first Epiphany guests when they turned and they left the Holy Family. Scripture actually tells us no more about what became of them. There is poetry that imagines what life might have been like for them. And maybe you know that wonderful T.S. Eliot poem, The Journey of the Magi. And toward the end of the poem, it has these lines. We return to our places, these kingdoms, but no longer at ease here in the old dispensation. In baptism, you and I are called to seek Christ in all persons. Do you remember that part of the covenant? Very, very clearly, the promises made in baptism invite us to seek Christ in the world around us, in the people we live with, in the people we work with. For our seeking Christ, if that is our Epiphany task, it surely does not end with our worship here. In fact, this is just a beginning. Just as those ancient travelers, having journeyed so long and so hard to get there, had to turn around and go home by another road. So we too spend most of our Christian lives away from this special place of encountering Christ. And we take what we learn, what we celebrate here, and we seek Christ out there in the world, in our places of work, with our neighbors, in our volunteer efforts, in our families, yes, even in our crazy, mixed-up families. Epiphany, church festival, but it reminds us that the seeking of Christ is not confined to the church work, or even church people. Christ is in the world, in the lives of those around us. He is not our property, nor is he managed by the church. A week before Christmas, I had the pleasure of serving the mashed potatoes at the Youth Services Bureau Christmas dinner for teens. This was about 150 young people unlikely to share a Christmas meal with their own families. I had the pleasure, I say, with the potatoes because the carrots weren't nearly as popular. But as I did, I told myself, look for the face of Christ in these young people. Another scoop, I would ask? Yes, please, I love mashed potatoes. Thank you. So when you're next in line at Tim Hortons, look for Christ in the person ahead of you, in the person behind you, in the person serving you. When a colleague who is bothersome and always needing your help asks for it yet again, look for Christ. When your family prevails upon you to try to bring peace to those who have a hard time seeing eye to eye, look for Christ when you host the meal. Say the maybe silent grace, thanking God that you're together and asking for help to see Christ, even when things are not quite as perfect as you long for them to be. Epiphany says that the gift of God in Jesus is for the world, the whole world, and all her peoples. Thank you, Jeff, for the invitation to be here and to share this feast among you this morning. Happy Epiphany.